just imagine, look back at the movies you saw, and when you saw them doing something, you're going to pretty much guess we were doing the same thing. Now, I went along pretty good until I got a little older. I was maybe 10, and I never had an allowance. Back then, you made do with what you had. You didn't ask your family for money. They didn't have any. You didn't get an allowance. I mean, you were expected to do things for nothing because, after all, you were getting free room and board after all. Now they don't count that in. They just want an allowance. We worked for everything, so I started doing things. I got to be kind of an entrepreneur. I went by one day, and I was walking down the street, and I passed an open garage door, and there was a lawnmower in there, and a rake and a bunch of yard equipment to mow lawn and do gardening. And I got a bright idea. I thought, well, let me go up to the door and ask a question. So I walked up to the door, and I knocked on the door, and the lady came to the door. I said, I see you but have a bunch of lawn gardening equipment in your garage, but your lawn seems to need mowing. She says, well, I've lost my husband, and she says, I can't work that stuff. I said, well, how would it be if I mowed your lawn and took care of it every week and watered it, and I would use your equipment to mow other people's lawns? And she said, oh, what a wonderful idea. So that was my first experience in mowing lawns. I'd mow a lawn for like 25 cents or 20 cents, and that would include edging, mowing, weeding, the whole thing. And that was pretty good money back then. You could do a lot with 20 cents. You could buy a Pepsi-Cola, a glazed donut, and a tamale at school for 5 cents each. So that was 15 cents. So that was my lunch. And there wasn't a lot of things to spend your money on anyway, because there wasn't anything for sale that I needed. Actually, after that, I started doing something else. My dad would go to the market down there and buy a bunch of oranges, a whole back seat of the old touring car, fill the car full of oranges, bring them home, wash them, and we'd get these little like sand buckets that you dig in the sand at the beach that the kids use. And each of those little buckets would hold about 2 or 3 oranges. So I'd go from door to door, and I was really small. And I'd walk up to the door. My dad would park around the street. I'd walk up to the door. The door would open. The woman would look out straight ahead and wonder who's there because she heard a doorbell. And then she'd have to look way down. Here's this little kid carrying 2 little buckets of oranges. And I'd say, hello, Mrs. So-and-so. I didn't know her name. And I'd say, would you like to buy some oranges? And she'd say, oh, no, Sonny, I just don't think I can afford oranges right now. I said, then I began to cry. I practiced that. I could cry at a drop of a hat. So little tears started running down my dirty face and my cheeks, and I was all dirty. Had a pair of little short pants on and no belt, but I had a rope through the loops, tied in a bow in front, and they for a kid about 3 or 4 years older than me. Here you have to remember the armed gang group again. And so she said, oh, no, don't cry. I say, well, if I don't sell these oranges, my dad's going to spank me. And so she'd buy the oranges. And we made good money that way. I had to turn all the money over to my parents. I didn't get to keep any of it. So as we went along, to go a little further now in my life. At that time, by the way, I did find a dime laying on the ground one day. And I had some money, but I put this dime in the back of my mouth. I didn't wipe it off. We had we never caught anything because we had what would you call it when you don't catch diseases? You have a great
immunity.
Yeah, we had all that because we lived with asbestos and everything you're not supposed to have.
Well, you were taking a shower in the river.
Oh, yeah, and the dead dogs and cats would float by, and we just knock them out of the way because there was an irrigation ditch with a bunch of current. So anyway, I had this dime in the back of my mouth, and I did that because another kid found out I had it, they'd beat me up for it if they could. Although I belonged to a group called the River Rats, so we were pretty tough kids, like our gang, or the Little Rascals. So anyway, I sold the oranges, then I was selling I started making belts and selling belts. But then I got to be about 16 years old, and I was home one morning. My dad was getting ready to take me to plant petunias, and that's damp. It's in the morning, and you're on your hands and knees crawling around the dirt. There's a phone call, and Bob Ross, a man in town that knew my parents, said, "What's Jack doing?" And my dad said, "Well, he's getting ready to go to work, picking petunias, planting petunias." He says, "Would he like a job working in the meat market here on my market on Durfee?" And my dad says, "I'm sure he would." So he called my name. I come to the phone. Right away, I had a job. He said, "It'll be 15 cents an hour, and you can swamp, you can rake sawdust, scrape blocks, and do all that kind of thing that we need to have done." I said, "Oh, that's great." I was so thrilled. And all of a sudden I'd grown up. I was in the adult world then because I had a job. So my mother saw that I had a white shirt that she'd wash out every day or every other day and long pants. So I got on my bike and I rode to work. I worked there until I was 16 years old when I got the job. And I was still working there until I rode to work one morning on a Sunday. It was December, first part of December, and it was about noon, and I was listening to the radio. I was listening to the Dodger Giant baseball game from New York. Actually, it was a recreated game. They didn't broadcast the games from coast to coast at that time. They didn't have the facilities. So I was listening to the ball game, and the way they did it, they had a board and a hammer sitting in a studio, and the guy would hit the board with a hammer, go bang. He said, "Well, there goes a fly ball out in the right field. It's going, it's gone." And he would recreate the ball game. So I was listening to that, and not much going on in the store at that moment. And all of a sudden, the broadcast went off, and there was some static. And the radios had static anyway, but this was unusually loud. And there was that interruption, and somebody came on and said, "We interrupt this program to announce that the Japanese had just attacked Pearl Harbor." And I stopped and I thought, I turned to my boss, Mr. Ross. I said, "Mr. Ross, where's Pearl Harbor?" And he says, "Well, it's in Hawaii." I said, "Well, where's Hawaii?" I had never been over 10 miles from home in my life. And I guess I still thought the world was flat because I'd never been much up in the mountains or anything like that. So to me, I still didn't get the gist of what was going on. He said, "Jack, why don't you go home and be with your family? And I'm going to close up and go home and be with mine." I said, "Okay." So I went home, rode my bike like blue blazes, got there, went in the house. My dad and mom and my sister were sitting around the old Philco radio. And they were listening, had their heads stuck in the radio to try to get some news of what was going on. Well, back then, news was very slow. If things weren't happening on the other side of the world at that time, it might take a week or 10 days before we heard about it. Something from the East Coast might take a week. It's amazing. We just didn't have the facilities to do it. So pretty soon somebody came on and said, "Everybody take blankets off the bed or sheets or anything that you can put up over the windows, nail them to the windows so that the light from the house won't come outside so you can't see it, because we're going to go into a blackout. And when you leave the house, be sure you turn all your lights off." So we sat there the rest of the day in total darkness. That night we walked outside, and but I have to say this at the moment. I knew something big was going on. But at my age and never having experienced anything like this, I didn't know what it was. What I did know is I wanted to be a part of it because it was exciting. And I was, at that age, I was ready to leave home. I was ready to get out there and do something. So we went outside that night, and there was Klieg lights, big searchlights all over the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And we heard gunfire, and we heard airplanes flying around. And we thought we were under attack. Well, it was a false alarm. We were not under attack, but everybody was panicking. Everybody was panicking. They were rushing to decisions, conclusions that weren't there yet. So,
Were you afraid, Grandpa? Was your parents afraid?
my parents, I didn't talk to them about it really. I was so busy listening and watching what was going on. I was ready to see the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, was I frightened? No, I was terribly excited. I wasn't the least bit afraid. All I knew was it was a whole new experience, and I was ready for new experiences. So, no, it didn't bother me that way at all. So somebody said, go out in the street and stop the cars because they have their headlights on. So we ran out there, us kids ran out there and stopped the cars and told them to turn the lights off. They did. And then after that, they painted out their headlights and just left a little narrow vertical light streak down the middle, so like a cat's eye, so other people could see them. And am I going too fast?
No, I'm fascinated because I haven't heard this before.
Oh, so the next point. Now, the reason I'm telling this story is because I am 95. I'm in good health. I believe in reality, but I want to tell this story because in a certain length of time, the people that are going to hear this need this knowledge so that they can pass it on to their children and their grandchildren because it's a big part of history. It was called the Greatest Generation, and there's a lot of reasons but that could be true. I didn't give myself that honor or all, but somebody else did. And if you want to believe that that's true, that's up to you, not up to me. So anyway, I just turned 17 that very month of December, 1941. I got the job when I was 16. Now it's a year later, just December 7th, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Right away, I asked my parents if they'd sign for me. I wanted to go in the Navy. My mother said, you're too young. So I went on and I got jobs. Oh, by the way, it was interesting because the job I had as a marketer, when he found out I wanted to enlist in the Navy, he said, well, as soon as you enlist, you've lost your job because I need to train somebody else. So George Irving, a buddy of mine, we got a job cutting down a grove of walnut trees. So we went up and bought a big cross saw, one of those big things you hold on to both ends, and a couple of big axes. We started cutting down a tree. I don't know what we thought we could do that for. But anyway, we never finished. I got in a fight with a kid up in Whittier, which is a few miles from our house. And I guess I won because I knocked out some of his front teeth. And they sent me, I had to go before Judge Corrado in Whittier. And this nice old judge, been around a long time. And he says, hi, Jack, how you? Because I'd been there before, but not for anything serious. And he says, what brings you here today? I says, well, I got in a fight, Your Honor, and I knocked out a kid's front teeth. And his parents want my parents to pay for his teeth. And, Your Honor, we don't have any money at all. He says, well, I think you ought to leave town then. So I went home and told my parents, and they signed for me, and I went in the Navy.
Just like that?
Yeah, in 1942. And then I went to Farragut, Idaho. I don't think we have to talk about Farragut, Idaho, although it was up in Idaho in the Sawtooth Mountains, and they had the Chinook winds that come down through there. It was in the wintertime. It was colder than blue blazes. It was really cold. So